Welcome to the Half Geek, Half Human podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology, business, and life. This podcast is powered by Atiba, an IT consulting and software development firm based in Nashville. I'm Anna Kate Ross, and I'm a project manager here at Atiba. And today we're going to interview John Bass and Les Wilkinson of Hashed Health to learn more about their efforts to leverage blockchain and Web3, and also about their venture studio, a collaborative approach to solving the toughest problems in healthcare. But first, hey, Joey. And also, what in the world is Web3?
That's a great question. And before our interview with John and Les, I honestly could have just said, I don't know. And although I've spent time and time again watching YouTube videos and prep for this to try to understand what in the world Web3 could be, I feel like once you hear what John and Les say about it, it's going to make so much more sense to just like a normal person like me. See, I'm just a salesperson here at Atiba. But as far as Web3 goes, I didn't even understand that there was a Web 1 and Web 2. But then once you start hearing about what Web 1 and Web 2 and now Web 3 is, you're really going to start to hear the word decentralized. And you're going to start to hear the words incentivized. So instead of all the power being held by the big companies like Google and Facebook and Meta, it's going to start to be owned. Like the power is going to be by the consumers and the people that are contributing to Web3. So that's a lot of stuff that you're going to hear as we talk to these two guys, and they are really great at articulating it. But Anna Kate, yeah, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really cool and still a little hard to understand, but I agree. John and Les, I'm sure, are going to bring a lot of clarity to this. And part of the reason it could be so challenging to wrap our minds around this and why people need to have Web3 and blockchain explained to them over and over again, including me, it's because we're in the early stages of it. And it's really hard to imagine the application of it and all the different applications that I'm sure will come. And one parallel that I've been thinking about is this was probably a little bit similar to when Bill Gates sent out that famous 1995 internal memo about the tidal wave that was going to be the internet and how it would affect consumers and businesses alike. And, back in 95, it was hard to imagine how we'd be using the internet now, like for all the e-commerce applications that we have, entertainment, social media. Imagine like using TikTok back in 1995 would be hard to even wrap your mind around that. And I think there's probably some parallels there to Web3.
Yeah, and not to mention, like it went from the internet was basically a web page with a guest book at the bottom. You could just basically write hey, we came here, we saw, we conquered, and then now it's become to like all these back and forth, conversations with people and comments and threads and forums and all this stuff that's really cool. And even back then was just it is really hard to wrap your head around. But now we're at the point where we're about to step into a new realm of blockchain and this decentralized internet that I think is going to be hard to grasp for a while, but then it's going to get really cool once we figure it out. And then it's just going to be like we go on Facebook these days and, type out, hang out with friends. It's going to be like that, but just on some kind of steroids. So anyway, that's just me geeking out about it. I know, Anna Kate, that you geeked out about it a lot, and you and I geeked out together about this whole Web3 concept. But once you guys start to hear from Les and John, like you're going to get super excited about it too. You're going to start doing research, and they're just genuinely funny guys. Like they had a good time with this. Their answers, like everything we asked them, they didn't have a heads up on a lot of it, and it was just really cool to see how excited they got about it. So. Anyway, it's going to be fun. You guys enjoy listening in, enjoy the podcast, and then we'll look forward to some of your comments afterwards.
All right. So we have a couple people here. We have Mr. John Bass. John, give us a slight little wave if you don't mind. And John is a graduate of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He's the founder and CEO of Hashed Health, which is headquartered here in Nashville. He's an internationally recognized author and speaker. He speaks mostly on blockchain, decentralized healthcare technology. He's the co-author of Blockchain and Healthcare Innovations that Empower Patients, Connect Professionals, and Improve Care. He's also a trail runner. He does some ultra running with one of our C-suite people here at Atiba as well. Same actually goes for Les, our other guest today, Les Wilkinson. He is the Chief Development Officer at Hashed Health. and a graduate of the greatest school in the country, the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. So go Vols. He has been in health tech since about 2012, did some law in Denver, like I said, also an ultra runner, and venture capitalist as well. So he's invested in businesses, he's heard pitches, countless pitches throughout the years. And then today, so we're going to talk about a really cool topic, which is Web3. It's one of those Web3, Web 3.0, blockchain, decentralized internet, all these terms, all these technology, like what in the world does it mean? We're going to try and talk through all of that today and all get confused together at some point. There's a lot of topics that go into this realm, but we're going to go a little bit into the history of Web 1.0, Web 2.0, which is kind of where we are now, but we're quickly stepping into this world of Web 3. So don't worry, even if after this episode you can't quite grasp what Web3 is. It's a complicated subject, but we're hoping that Les and John can help shed some light on it here. So welcome, Les. Welcome, John. We're glad to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Joey. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. So we're going to kind of get right into some questions. So Anna Kate, do you want to lead it off and talk to these guys and try to help us learn a little bit?
So what we thought we would start right at the top, defining what Web3 is, and maybe even higher than that. Why is this so difficult for people to understand? When we were preparing for this, we were kind of laughing that this seems like a topic that needs to be explained to people over and over and over again. So give us kind of a definition and background on Web3.
Les, you want to go first?
Yeah, it's funny, Anna Kate. It's when you talk about blockchain and Web3, it's a little like asking somebody, well, what's the value prop of the internet? And it kind of depends on who you ask and what the context is. What is Web3? So I tend to be more of a reductionist. So what is the core value prop of what we're trying to achieve? And when I think of Web3, there's really two things that come to mind more than anything else. One is the behavior change resulting from contributions made to the platform, and then the ability to own, control, participate, special rights emerging from those participations. So what does all that mean? Because that's just gobbledygook. Well, the one that's in the news today, obviously, is Twitter. And so Twitter works because all of us get on Twitter and supply our content. And the value exchange that we receive is we're able to communicate with other people. But Twitter as a platform has built an incredible business on top of that by selling ads, basically, selling ad-based revenue models. And so I'm not getting any direct benefit off of that other than continued use of the platform. So one core value prop of Web3 is having users who are making contributions to the build and development of the platform, having them have an ownership stake, having them have a voice and control of the governance of how the platform is developed and how it will continue. And that is a critical difference. And I think that's what really unlocks a lot of value. It also is where things get really complicated. So how does that governance stuff really work? You can, if you think about, again, Twitter, you have billions of users, all, what can they actually control and vote on? Do they vote on the look and feel? Do they vote on who the CEO is going to be? I mean, all of these things that, honestly, playbooks are still being written.
Right. And the way you're describing how Twitter is functioning now and the way that it works is users submit content to the platform. And that's how the whole ecosystem works. That's Web 2, right? That's how we're existing currently in Web 2. And so in well, I was just going to say there's a decentralization, but then also instead of just the central, the players making any kind or receiving value from that, the individual contributors can also receive value, which is a big difference. Am I understanding that right?
You got it. You got it. And so the other piece that I consider to be a core value proposition is what Chris Dixon at A16Z always uses, as he describes blockchain in general as well as Web3, which is the ability for a protocol, the software, or a platform to make commitments that you can count on. And so here's this is the kind of thing that happens all the time. So we'll stick with Twitter, okay? So Twitter can say, look, you get on platform, you contribute your content, and it's just a communications platform. We're never going to use your data for anything else. Well, they can change their mind if they want to. And so, provided that they're doing it above board, they can change their mind, and maybe I've built my business on top of that communication platform. And so I've made lots of investments. And so my options are to take a model that doesn't work for me anymore or leave it. And so the one of the core value props is having users own, control, and govern the platform is, that it's not going to be changed unless a sufficient critical mass of those similarly situated users decide that that's the direction that the platform should take. So the ability for the platform to make, and the software really, to make commitments that can be relied on.
I would be curious. You mentioned Twitter. I kind of want to stick with Twitter just because that's where we are. Is there any way to translate like the way Twitter is today in the Web 2.0 to Web 3, like how Twitter could adapt into Web 3? And I'll take an infamous line from a great philosopher, Michael Scott, and say, explain it to me like I'm 5.
I think you start with a tokenization strategy. So people who, and so think of it this way, instead of having the platform owned by shareholders, it now becomes owned by token holders, and tokens are issued for people who are making positive contributions to that platform. And the token can be designed in any way you want, but proper token design are things that are designed to encourage network effects across the platform. So what does any of that mean? I think the way I like to think about it is you have a bunch of users in an environment. So even a community of where people live. What if people had equity, like direct equity in their community? How would it change their behavior? Would they vote more? Would they be more thoughtful about who they voted for? Would they support more civic organizations? Would they support public benefits? Would they support public education more? Because they have a direct economic incentive to do so. And so I think that's one way of thinking about how that would work is contributors onto Twitter would receive value in exchange for positive platform contributions. Now, what could that mean? That could mean they're going out and finding bots who are inappropriately using the platform and exposing that. That would be one thing that I would find valuable in Twitter. So that's just one example.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is Web3 is a new version of the internet that adds this property of ownership. And so that's what's new that's never existed before. You've never before been able to own a digital asset, whether that's an image like an NFT or any type of digital asset that's represented and tracked on a blockchain. So the blockchain and these kind of these principles of Web3 enable that type of digital ownership. And so what that does is it opens up this whole new design space around how you organize a company or how you provide services to a community of individuals. And it creates this embedded incentive for adoption that the world has kind of never seen before. So I think it's that kind of ownership economy, that creator economy that's created through Web3, that's created this whole new design space that people are just now starting to explore.
Yeah, so this is all really helpful. So the one question I had too is it the creators and the individuals, if they're owning the digital asset, are they the ones who will benefit most from an internet like Web3, or is it companies, or perhaps both?
I think ultimately it'll be both. But the Web3, at the heart of Web3 is the ability to reward the community for their contributions in a way that's not happening in Web 2. So whether it's Twitter or Uber, imagine if you relaunched Uber where all the drivers were owners of Uber rather than a centralized company owning Uber. Or imagine if you rebuilt Twitter or Google or any of the big Web 2 companies where the users are rewarded for their contributions. So instead of having these centralized organizations that have this insatiable need to collect your data, extract your data, and just it's never enough because they have to satisfy Wall Street and all these things. You kind of flip that upside down into where it's the consumers, it's the participants in the network, the community who's receiving the value. And the extraction made by the platform is a lot smaller, and the network effects are a lot greater. That's the idea of Web3.
And I can also add an aspect that's where we meet you all in the market, which is on the development of these things. And so if you think back to all the open source projects upon which the internet lives today, there's no ownership in those. There's no incentive model other than the vision to build something that can ultimately turn into and drive greater innovation beyond it. But in terms of being able to have an economic incentive in the success of the open source project, it's never existed until Web3. If I was a major contributor to the HTTP protocol in 1996, I got no direct economic benefit from that. And I certainly don't have any direct economic benefit by virtue of the fact that it's what we all use every single day today. And so what I think that's a massive change, because it now, the people that were doing all that work were either doing it because their employer told them to, or they were doing it because they were passionate about it, and they were doing it nights and weekends. Well, Web3 enables people to make a career out of that.
I was just going to say, one would argue there is some of this with Web2 when if we go back to Twitter, if you're cultivating your following and you're creating a platform for yourself on Twitter, you are gaining value out of it. But that would, I think, feed into that's still a lot of centralized power. It's not decentralized. There's not opportunity for lots of people to gain benefit. It would just be from a few of the power users, a small percentage point. Is that the right thinking?
That is the right thinking. And I've seen businesses across my career that have become platform dependent and have died, not because the main platform wanted to kill them. They were just collateral damage.
Yeah, these platforms break the hearts of entrepreneurs all the time because they change the rules, right? And so, in a lot of ways, with Web2 companies, kind of we're all the product, right? All of our contributions and all of our data are feeding these centralized business models that are aggregating data and then selling advertising primarily. And so we all the Twitter users, all the Uber drivers are the product of Web2, right? You are the product of Google. And in Web3, the platform works for you. You are so we flip it upside down, and it's really that fundamental shift, I think, is really in line with where society is headed. It's almost like with Web 1, we started with SMTP and HTTP, and these were credibly neutral protocols that were designed to enable the sharing of information. And with Web 2, everything's centralized to a few companies that were hell-bent on aggregating and collecting all of your data and then selling advertising back to the community. And so, we all we all currently work for these protocols. And in Web 3, we kind of reverse that and bring it back to the way it was originally supposed to be, which is where the contributors and the curators and the creators are the ones who are going to be rewarded for their contributions to these platforms. So that's the kind of the way we look at it. And in whether it's music or healthcare or social media or whatever, that opens up these brand new business models and design patterns and kind of design spaces that really allow entrepreneurs to think of new ways to solve these old problems.
Those are great overviews of kind of where we've moved from Web 1 to Web 2, and now with kind of the Web 3 on the horizon and here in many ways. I'm thinking I feel like we could talk about this for quite a while, but let's at this point talk to us a little bit about hashed health and what is hashed health? How are you guys tying into Web 3, your value proposition? And I also am very curious to learn more about Venture Studio.
Yes, but because you did kind of bring up there, John, you're like, yeah, it's, Web 3 and healthcare, like, because I listened to what you guys said, and keep in mind, Joey here, I'm a salesperson by trade. I'm not a technical person, so I apologize for my lack of terminology here. But I'm curious, based on what I just heard, to see how that type of mentality applies to healthcare and healthcare technology. So I would love to see, I guess, how hashed health is taking that and making it something.
Yes. So healthcare, blockchain and Web3 are kind of like, I see them as an operating system for trust and transparency and incentive alignment for a lot of different use cases. And so blockchains enable us to kind of think differently about how we manage all the different various value chains that are part of our care delivery system. And so my background is in supply chain, which is one type of value chain, and also kind of these surgical subspecialties like orthopedics and spine, and how do we deliver and pay for that care? And traditionally, the way we've done that is not really sustainable. It's driving, there's a lot of administrative burden that goes into these care delivery models, all these inefficiencies that are driving the fact that healthcare delivery is like 20% of GDP. And we've not done really a whole lot to fix that problem to date. And so it just gets worse every year. So, because of the experiences that Les and I and others at Hashed have had over the years, we see real opportunities to rethink some of the infrastructure that sits underneath the care delivery systems that are optimized, these new structures that are optimized for transparency and trust and rational exchange of services. And blockchain and distributed ledger technologies, and now what's being called Web3, we're kind of continuing to kind of add these new primitives, these new tools that allow us to rebuild those underlying systems in ways that solve for trust and transparency and alignment of incentives across the value chains. And so within healthcare, there's a lot of different use cases, and we are every day thinking about how to build new startups that have really innovative business models that are uniquely enabled by these community architectures. Because rarely can you solve these fundamental challenges one company at a time. That's what we've traditionally tried to do, and it hasn't really worked. So now with Hash, we get to think about these kind of utility or community-focused business models where we're bringing together organizations and communities and people to solve shared problems as a aligned transparent, rational network of organizations who are all kind of trying to solve a shared problem. And so our venture studio model is really, a product of a lot of work that we did in the first couple years of Hashed, which was largely consulting with large enterprises, insurance companies, health systems, banks, other technology companies, where we were able to experiment and find design patterns that kind of indicated to us where the low-hanging fruit was. And then after all that experience, we said, hey, we've got all these great ideas. These ideas really need a vehicle for commercialization. And Les is really the architect of our venture studio model, which brings a really robust and thoughtful and intentional discovery and delivery system to the innovation process. He almost kind of created a kind of a hack of the innovation process that allowed us to create a repeatable way of de-risking startups and running through a kind of a product management process that results in a viable spin out. And so I'll let Les describe that process to you because he's really the architect of that. But that's what Hashed is. We're a venture studio, which means we use a process of discovery and delivery activities to kind of validate and de-risk and launch new companies. And so we're focused purely on kind of these community architectures for healthcare and life sciences.
That is so interesting. And Les, I want to hear from you also. But so essentially companies come to you, you help them look for delivery opportunities and other optimizations. And then if they would like, they may also join in with Venture Studio, where there's a collaborative effort among other companies that you work with to help solve some joint problems. Is that how it works? Venture Studio is an elective component of Hashed Health?
Yeah, so currently the way our studio works is we're most of the things that we're pushing through our studio are internally generated ideas. Sometimes we'll get together with an external entrepreneur and just get in front of a whiteboard and come up with a new idea together. Sometimes we'll have organizations that are already kind of out doing things that come to us and ask for our opinions and help, which we're grateful for. And we try to find a way to support those as well. But that latter category tends to be kind of outside the studio because typically they're kind of on their own path by then. Because really our studio starts it's this basic idea. It's a hypothesis of a problem. And it's sort of a really big idea. And then our job, which we spend about a month on, is we take that idea and we try to achieve what we call the minimum viable problem. Like, so what is the smallest problem that we could solve that unlocks our journey towards solving a much larger problem in the market? But it gives us the ability to focus and focus our development efforts. And we do that, you're going to hear this term a lot, collaboratively. So we do that by going into the market with people who we've developed relationships with over the years across all of healthcare and really sort of putting these hypotheses to them and saying, well, we think this is a problem. Help me understand if it actually is. Is it truly a burning need, or is it kind of a nice to have, or are we just way off, or is there some, like, usually what we've discovered is that problems exist for really good reasons, and sometimes those reasons can be solved and sometimes they can't. And so we really try to, without spending a lot of capital and without spending a lot of time, we really try to see if something actually has legs or not in terms of whether we're dealing with a real problem. And then once we've done that, then we move into sort of solution discovery, where we've come up with this minimum viable problem, and we try to come up with a minimum viable solution by throwing as much spaghetti against the wall as we possibly can. And then by engaging with our collaborative network, winnowing that down into what we believe is kind of the minimum viable solution. And then we take that and we tend to use a sprint week format. And we emerge from the sprint week with a prototype that is in users' hands. And the goal of that would be to have an MVP at the end of that process. Doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you get the wrong answer, which is the right answer. But all of this that I just described, I like to call it startup Darwinism. And that's really kind of what I feel like is this sort of secret sauce in the studio model, is when you're not wed to one single thing and you've gone out and raised money from your friends and family, and you feel like I am beholden to focus on this one idea and pivoting is bad and that sort of thing. Being able to free yourself from all of that and say, look, I want to know as early as I possibly can whether or not this is something I should spend my time and money on. And the moment I decide I don't really have conviction in that, I can put that aside and take something else off the pile and go start working on that.
I'm curious if, and you don't have to give like names or company names or anything like that, but I'm curious as to like a problem that you guys identified and then used hashed health to get that problem solved and out into the marketplace.
Yeah, so the best example of that would be our first spinoff, which is a company called Professional Credentials Exchange. And so this is, when we first started with this idea, we had gotten a lot of feedback in the market that there were a lot of workflows related to practitioner identity. So healthcare practitioner identity. And so these workflows are things like credentialing. So you have to be credentialed in order to be, become employed as a physician or a nurse, in order to have be enrolled in a health plan, et cetera. Then there's the enrollment process. There's provider directories that have to be maintained. There's privileging that occurs. All of this relates to, all right, you as a physician or a nurse or a tech or a mid-level, what are your credentials? And so there's all of these currently are happening in silos. And so there's a tremendous amount of redundancy in work, and there's a redundancy in data. And so the idea that we had was, look, what if we created, and so there's the problem, right? And we went out into our network, and that problem was validated over and over again. In fact, people would tell us, look, all this blockchain stuff sounds really nice and fancy, but could you just solve the credentialing problem? Or could you help me figure out how to maintain a provider directory and keep it up to date so that I don't get fined? So those are really good signals from the market. So from there, we did a lot of prototyping and ultimately decided that credentialing was going to be our first thing to go get. So that was our minimum viable problem. How do we go and solve credentialing? And so with that, we found a co-founder, which is critical to our model, again, with the collaboration. This is a gentleman by the name of Anthony Bagando, who's been in the credentialing space for a long time, multiple successful startup entrepreneur, and all around great guy. So we started collaborating with him around like, okay, how specifically could we use this technology that John and I have been working on together with his subject matter expertise. And so we built a solution for that enables organizations to share data in a trusted, secure way so that the recipient of that data can look and see the provenance of the data and how it was created. And then an incentive model that encouraged people to participate. And we went out in the market and tested that. We built a prototype, built a business plan, we built a network of enterprise organizations, and then we raised a separate round of capital on that business. And that's when we spun it out. And so that is a overview of our process, at least at a super high level.
And about what's the time frame from start to finish on that?
Yeah. So we model, that was our first one, so it took longer. But what we model 15 months from zero to spin out.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's I try to be conservative in my modeling, so I feel like we can do that much faster. But we want to get more and more reps so that we can hone that, perfect it, make it more efficient, and that's sort of the process that we're in right now.
Yeah, you're speaking right up into Kate's alley.
There are other studios out there that have a higher cadence, and every studio is a little different in terms of kind of how they operate. But for us, we're working in healthcare, and we're not building dog walking apps. We're building pretty sophisticated like data exchanges and marketplaces and things that aren't simple from a go-to-market perspective, even if it was Web 2. And you throw the Web 3 thing in there and it adds some new elements. And ultimately, these are technical and business architectures that the world's never seen before. And so I think over time, as we get better and better, and we're now hiring someone to help us kind of make that process really tight and efficient, I think you'll see us start to shrink that time frame down. But for us, it does take a while, especially to do that kind of very thorough discovery and delivery process.
John, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh my gosh, I don't. Probably a rock climber. I'm still trying to figure that out. Actually, I don't know. I don't know.
And I hear you talk about this incredible company you've built and the products that you're building for your clients. It's really fascinating and awesome. And I just wonder if your child self ever would have imagined that you would have gone this route.
No, it wouldn't. And honestly, I don't think I realized what we were going to be doing when, 5.5 years ago when we started Hashed. And I don't know that I know today what we're going to be doing in a year or two. This is a new space that's evolving so rapidly. And we are innovating at every angle. And I'm not sure where all that comes from, but the venture studio model is an innovative approach to creating startups. The Web3 and blockchain technologies we use are really innovative technical models for solving problems that allow us to build really innovative new business models that the world's never seen before. What we all know we want to do is we've spent a long time trying to fix healthcare problems, and we've built and exited successful companies, but I don't know that we've really solved a whole lot. And I think that's true for the industry. And I think there's an opportunity coming out of COVID. All the world just seems to be aligning around its thirst and its interest in doing things differently and more collaboratively, and with a real eye towards true patient agency, nurse agency, doctor, giving people agency over their data, over their careers, over their education, over their lives. And, using these Web3 concepts of community ownership, transparency, trust, alignment. This is how healthcare needs to work. And if there's any industry out there that needs Web3, it's healthcare. And it's got such a potential to help a lot of people. And so that's what Les and I are fortunate to be able to wake up and think about every day. And it's just an amazing opportunity that I'm really grateful to have.
That's really cool.
Do I get to go?
Yes, please.
So when I was a kid, I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau, and so I wanted to be an oceanographer. And I'm not really sure why, to be honest, because it was when I was a little kid. I think it was the hat, or just maybe the idea of like being on a boat all the time, or going out with your buds and like scuba diving sounded really, really cool. And then I decided I wanted to be a writer, and that wore off. And then I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, and a lot of that had to do with, I think, I was I grew up in a small town, and that was like, it was small town USA. And back then, the lawyers were like some of the most respected people in town. And strange as that sound, I mean, they really, really were. I mean, they were the people that you went to when you needed help. And so I think a lot of those people were my mentors. And so that's sort of set the course for my career. But what happened was I started practicing law, and I love practicing law. There are a lot of people that don't. They get into law firms and they just don't like it. I mean, it's not perfect, but I was in a great firm. I worked with great people. I had great clients. I did sophisticated work. I was part of firm governance, but after a while, I just, you kind of get bored. And so I had an opportunity to get in a venture with one of my clients. And so I did that. I just jumped out of the boat into another boat and started doing that. And I did that. And I had a great time doing that. It was wonderful being part of company creation and supporting other entrepreneurs and all of that. And then that kind of started getting a little bored. And then John came along, and I jumped into the Hash Health boat. And I think a couple of lessons from that. One is I'm so grateful that I've, what John has built and I've contributed to is this environment where I don't think I'm ever going to get bored again. Because we can get up and do entrepreneurial things, and we can change what we're doing to meet what we feel like is the best thing that we should be doing with our time and our investors' resources. And so that's a blast. The other thing is, paths in life are not linear. And so whatever you set for yourself, it probably would have been really cool if I could have become Jacques Cousteau, but that's just not the way life works. And so you have to give yourself a tremendous amount of flexibility. And I'm also just a huge proponent of the growth mindset. And so understanding that no matter where you are in your career path or your life situation, that's not where you have to be. You can always create a new situation for yourself, but it won't happen for you.
I think that's really really well put. Just simply because when I remember being back in high school, I'm not going to go into years, but I was back in high school doing HTML projects. Like, you had to build a web page based on very simple HTML commands. That would have been considered Web 1, where your only contribution to the internet was maybe you would put out a static web page and throw out like a guest book on there where people could just leave a comment. But then you get to this Web 2, which seemed like such a huge jump, where there's all these, it's centralized, but there is all these content contributors out there that are putting out content that's really good stuff. They're getting paid. And now we've taken this other huge leap into this Web 3 era that I'm thinking about the HTML project I did in high school. It's like, I never would have dreamed that we would have gotten to this conversation today, where there's individual contributions to the build of the internet and how it works and how it's decentralized. And then they receive cool ownership over what they've done in that way. And I heard John say one word that stuck out was like incentives. So you have this incentive to do good for the future of the internet. And I think that's really cool. Just seeing that back from, in the 90s, early 2000s to where we are now in just, 2 decades. It's pretty impressive and pretty cool. So, and I like hearing the Jacques Cousteau. That would have been interesting to see. But yeah, thank you guys for sharing that. And I think that as far as kind of on the human side, because, this is the Half Geek, Half Human podcast, we have to talk more on the human side. You're both ultra runners. We mentioned that earlier. I'm going to ask a very pointed question. Who is faster?
That's easy.
We're both really slow.
No, I'm kidding. John's way faster.
No. We're both. Les got me into this low heart rate thing, and it's really changed my life. It's allowed me to run ultras when I thought I was going to have to hang it up because I kept getting hurt. So there's kind of this way of training where you keep your heart rate super low, and it's scientifically proven to reduce injury. And so all of a sudden I'm doing ultras again when I didn't think I'd be able to. So I think we both are intentionally slow ultra runners.
It's like somebody told me a long time ago about fishing. Like, your measure as a fisherman is how is the smallest fish you can catch while still being thrilled about catching it, right? And so, like, to me, that's sort of like running. What's the slowest that you can go and still feel like you're on an adventure? Because the adventures is the most important part about it.
Yeah,
it's not the speed. Not in our world.
And it's a value for our company. Endurance and evolution are core values of Hashed, and there's a lot of strong ties between kind of our endurance running and kind of the work we do at Hashed.
That's cool. Is there a specific ultra that as I was looking on Ultra Sign Up, just looking a little bit of your past results and stuff, is there a favorite run out of all of those that you've done in the past? Like, what would be, I guess, your top favorite ultra you've run?
I just did one a few weeks ago that's my favorite, and I think the last one you did oftentimes will probably be your favorite, just because. But this Laurel Highlands run was really amazing for me. It was really hard, and that's probably one. And I finished, which is one reason I loved it so much. But it was just a beautiful, challenging, long day. Where you kind of really had a chance to go deep and push yourself and learn about yourself. And, a lot of these races, on these trails, you're kind of by yourself out there between aid stations, and people get all spread out. And it's got real highs and real lows that are just kind of fantastic to work through.
I'm seeing some parallels, Anna Kate, on their trail running and the way they run their business. So I think that's really interesting. It's
Truly,
really cool.
I totally agree. Well, we're just about out of time, but we were so glad to have you both on the podcast. And thank you so much for spending some time with us talking about Web3 and blockchain and your company and also yourselves. This was a really fun time. So thanks to you both.
This was great. We're excited to publish this one. We're excited to have Les and John here, and who knows, we might have you guys back in the future for Web 4. So you guys just be ready for that here in a few years, and we'll keep the train going. But thank you guys again. Thanks everybody for listening in, hanging out with us, and just stay tuned until next time.
You've been listening to Half Geek Half Human.